This is Outward. It's a realistic third-person open-world RPG. I suspect this game was someone's passion project. It really seems like one of those games that just had a great core idea but kind of fell apart in the execution. It's hard to put my finger on it at times, but the game just doesn't feel like it's finished. It's hard to say for sure, but I think that's my beef with Outward. It looks like it's done, but then, bam! It hits you with floating cobwebs. The game has this amazing core concept of the adventurer's experience. You're not the chosen one, you're not destined for great things, you're just some guy. The game does something amazing that I think a lot of other games are too afraid to do. You as the player, you yourself, level up and get better at the game, more so than your character. You learn recipes, attack patterns of enemies, which enemies can be smacked and which ones will smack you. Honestly, this foundation is why I think the game has done so well, despite the rest of the game being a bit of a mess. Let me elaborate. I kept running into stuff that made me feel like the game just wasn't done. A lot of love went into the designing of settlements, for example, but they feel really empty. All the NPCs wandering around might as well be T-posing, because you can't interact with them and they don't do anything. There's people clearly doing noisy things in this town, but there's no ambient sound. This guy's name is ironically self-aware about the issue. I mean, even the rain is quiet. The interior of buildings are so hollow, it seemed like someone just placed some prefabs here and called it a day. Oh, and the voice acting. Other people have covered this, but I can't not mention the voice acting.
I guess this is goodbye. I'm leaving this place to join the Holy Mission. Excellent!
The characters have some of their lines voiced, but whether it's the whole thing or just half is a coin flip. Sometimes they just cut off in the middle of a sentence. If I had to guess, it seems like they did the voice acting before they finalized the dialogue. Or maybe there was a translation issue. I don't know. I think no voice acting would have been better than all this. The voice acting is a prime example of where the game needs more polish, but there's tons more. For example, in the starting village you can scrounge around for some supplies to help you before you set off on your first journey. You'll find some berries, a water skin, etc. You know, adventuring stuff. You then come across a tree with an axe in it, and you're prompted to remove the axe. You are then immediately prompted to harvest wood from the tree. Oh, that's cool, you think to yourself. You use this tool to gather wood, and on your merry way you go. However, here's the thing. I played the game for like 10 hours before I realized that you don't actually need the axe to gather wood. You can just go up to any tree without it and just gather. And this is pretty much the first tree you'd interact with. The way they set it up just seems kind of silly. Maybe this was just my experience, but it does seem a little inconsistent that you have all these other tools like the lantern or the pot that are necessary, but the axe does nothing. I know this is a small point to hop on about, but I just had to get it off my chest. Anyway, the game does have some great design. It starts off in this kind of realistic low fantasy survival adventure, which I really enjoyed. You've got to set up camp, gather and cook your food, and take time to repair your equipment. And the in-game map is just that, a map. It doesn't magically show you where you are on it. You have to pay attention to it, otherwise, like any old wanderer, you'll get lost. But the game does help you out with some really great landmarks. For example, this fuck-off big mountain. It's pretty hard to get lost with this thing around. This is a great example of what good mechanical synergy looks like. Map simple, mountain big. I really like this sort of realism that Outward had going for it. A lot of games these days are really scared to do that because it can make the experience a bit boring. But man, I love this crap. You're an adventurer who needs to eat and rest and stay on the road as to not get lost. Unfortunately, the game rapidly evolves into this high fantasy setting where it starts to feel strange that my godly magical character still needs to eat bread. I honestly could have played a whole game based off the first section of Outward. But maybe I mistook the game for something it wasn't. Fuck off Big Mountain should have been a pretty big red flag that this game was going to get pretty anime pretty quickly. Another game system that I thought fell apart on the execution was the Contextual Deaths. I don't think I've seen this in a game before. I'll give credit where credit is due, this is a really unique system. What happens when you die depends on your context. Die to bandits and they'll drag you back to their camp. Die near a town and a local will carry you back to safety. It sounds like a really neat and realistic system in practice, but in effect it quickly devolves. You can die several times to the bandits, and they will repeatedly leave you in an unlocked room with your backpack nearby, making for an easy escape. Hell, they didn't even steal any of my stuff. Now, I guess this is the starting area, so it's understandable that dying is forgivable. But what happened next to me really made me hate this system. I managed to die in the bandit camp while I was trying to retrieve my stuff. The contextual death I got was some mysterious stranger Deus Ex Machina'd me out of there. He hauled me back to safety, on the other side of the map, without any of my equipment. I was stranded. The way back was through a dungeon I couldn't complete without my weapons and armor, so I just had to start over. Maybe this was just me getting unlucky, but man, the fact that you can get stuck in a fail state like that makes me think the contextual deaths weren't really thought through. There's a really great one where you get thrown into a slave mine and you gotta plan this whole rebellion to get out. But I can't imagine what happens if you die several times trying to bust out of that one. This honestly sums up Outward pretty well. Great idea, not fully planned out. And again, I can see that the developers put a lot of time in designing these really creative characters and interesting enemies. Characters of certain factions really stand out, and the monsters are real works of art. Like, when I see a tough enemy coming, I know my jimmies are about to get rustled. And again, fighting them is a learning experience. Most have weaknesses, and if you learn what they are, then you can beat them. Some enemies you can't even beat without the right stuff. I love this. You can't just left-click your way out of trouble. This experience is the skeleton of the game, and it's really solid. Enough so that I'd still recommend the game if you like RPGs. The game has a bunch of other smaller synergy problems. Like, the game has several unique classes and there's multi-classing, but the hotbar they give you only has 8 slots. And this is for potions as well. There's hundreds of potions in this game. I didn't even multi-class and I just had to not use some of my abilities because I couldn't fit them in. I wanted to use all my stamina potions, but I also wanted to be able to do this. The music also didn't always match what I was doing. Sometimes I was just in a village and Epic Track 3 was playing.
How can I help you?
I'm just trying to buy some arrows here, game. Please calm down. My biggest gripe by far, though, was the level design in Outward. There's usually some pretty well-decorated dungeons, but the sort of interaction you get with them is highly limited. Most of them are usually just move through, kill enemies, get an ornate chest as a reward. Why does an ancient temple have the same end chest as a bandit camp? Who knows? There are some levers in certain dungeons that open passages and things like that, but they usually feel a bit out of place. Like, why do 3 random levers spread across an underground cave open a portcullis towards where you need to go? Video game reasons, that's why. These levers are everywhere, and you never know with them. Sometimes they open doors, sometimes they deactivate magical force fields. Some even say the universe was created when one of these things was pulled. And it's strange, there's some really good uses of interactivity in the game. Without giving away too many spoilers, there's trick levers that make the players fall through false floors, or release powerful enemies into a room so you can set up before a fight. This kind of clever environmental design is present in the game, which makes you wonder why they didn't use it more. The worst offender by far is one of my favourite dungeons. This is a bit of a spoiler, but there's this one dungeon in the mid-game that has this beautiful centerpiece of a glowing spear of light. Pretty quickly, you find a way to set off a trap in the room below. As you progress through the dungeon, you find several of these super difficult brute enemies that stunlock you and kill you pretty quickly. However, you can lure them into the room below and close the gates around it. You can then set off the trap and boom, you kill like 5 of these usually impossible to kill creatures. What a great use of environment. The player that thinks is rewarded. And that is kind of like the ethos of Outward. Knowledge is what sets you apart from a dead adventurer. Knowing what to eat and drink, knowing what to bring to a fight, knowing how to fight enemies. However, in the same dungeon you see the worst of Outward. Look at this beautifully designed set piece, and then look at the animation. The best they could do was just some puffs of light in a couple of places in the room. And also, you set it off with a lever. A fucking lever. What is going on here? It's never explained. It's just a game puzzle that says game puzzle written on the box. I mean, a flash of light that blinds you and kills all the creatures would have been better than these poofs. And, to top it off, you never even find out what the giant light spear even is. I think I can see what happened here, and it makes me sad. A group of passionate developers had a dream. They tried to make the dream come true, but there just wasn't enough money for that one last animation. Outward clings at its chance of being a AAA experience. It even fools you with the facade of one. But then, when you look a little closer, you just see cracks everywhere. If the devs maybe spent more time on smoothing out rough edges instead of trying to add more features, I think this could have been a masterpiece. Instead, it's just outward. Thanks for watching.